Hello, Internet Magicman here once again with Ask MMOBomb, the show where you ask questions and we give you the answers. We got a lot of questions from last week's show and a few things we should touch on just to clean up some things from last week's show. We got a lot of feedback on my personal most anticipated for 2013. Yes, I did realize in editing that I neglected to say Neverwinter. Definitely one of my most anticipated for 2013. Phantasy Star Online 2. Yes, a game I'm incredibly looking forward to, but doesn't make my most anticipated list for one simple reason. I've already played it. I know pretty much what I'm going to get with that one. Doesn't mean that I'm not looking forward to it, but it's not really most anticipated because I know what I'm going to get since I did have some hands-on time with it before Western audiences could not jump onto the existing server. So, there you go. Yes, I forgot one or two there. I knew I did. It was a spur-of-the-moment answer, and so there you go. Also, lots of great feedback on what you would make as an MMO. There's lots of great ideas out there. I hope somebody may be watching, and hey, if you have the power to incorporate some of the features you see gamers wanting, reach out. Get the ideas cleared up. There's mine's still fleshing out, it's kind of what would beginners do if they came late, then maybe we go back to the process of old builds, things like that. So yeah, lots of great feedback, lots of fun. Let's get to this week's questions though. Okay, so Wooser says, Magicman, what's your opinion of anime-based MMOs? I enjoy them, there seems to be a lot of them, but they also get an awful lot of bashing. And by animated MMOs, or anime MMOs, I mean things like Rusty Hearts, Ragnarok Online, L-Sword, not just cartoony, but anime. That's a good question. You don't see me playing a lot of anime MMOs unless I'm making a first look, or I did stream L-Sword on an episode of Bomb Live. That's because I'm not drawn to anime that way. It has nothing to do with the game. I'm just not a huge anime fan. I don't have libraries of manga books or anime DVDs or anything like that. I do have a few favorites. I do watch Cowboy Bebop from time to time. I do like some of the older stuff like Ninja Scroll, things like that. But I'm not a huge anime follower. I can appreciate the art style. I've just never been drawn into it that much. So as far as my opinion on them, I'm 50-50. First, I'm looking for good gameplay and a solid game. Then I appreciate the art style. I'm not drawn to an anime MMO simply because it's anime and I love anime. There's a huge market for that. I'm just not part of that market. I'm looking for a solid game first, and then I can appreciate the art style afterwards. Now, as far as why there's a lot of slamming going on for those types of games, I think it's kind of the same thing we saw in 2012, where 2012 was like the rise of the free-to-play first-person shooter. I mean, we pretty much were talking about a new one every single week. And the anime MMO market has done the same thing. It's so saturated with titles that aren't good or claim to be anime but are more, as you say, on the cartoony side of things, that it starts to get a bad rap when you have that many bad or mediocre or carbon copy titles in one genre. The ones that people like, myself, Ragnarok Online. Not so sure about 2 right now. I want to get some more hands-on time with that. But the original, I appreciated the art style, but I liked the game. It was a good game. Rusty Hearts is another one, even though there's some cash shop things I don't really disagree with, or really agree with. And then, yeah, I enjoyed L-Sword, but it's not something I would play day to day. It would be a jump in and waste an hour or so. So I think it's because the market is saturated. You have bad title, bad title, bad title, bad title, and you have to wade through 5 or 6 mediocre at best games before you hit another one that you're like, okay, this is a good game. So I don't think it's the anime-inspired MMO that gets all the bashing. I think it's the bad ones, which are more prevalent than the good ones, so you see more bashing. Exactly like you saw in 2012 for the rise of the free-to-play first-person shooter. So there you go, Wooser. Hope that answers your question. For me, 50-50. I'm looking for gameplay first. I'm not drawn to games simply because they're anime art styles. Next question. All right, a question near and dear to my heart. Ruov says, I've been seeing a lot of games selling Founders packages now. What's your opinion on them? All right, I'm going to try and keep this as short as I can because we have addressed this on the free-to-play cast multiple times. I'm okay with a game putting packages in its cash shop, obviously. I mean, there's no big problem in that. If I can buy X, Y, and Z in the cash shop, or I can buy a bundle that has all three and a couple percentage points marked off the price, great, I'm all for it. Put together your little packages, throw them in the cash shop, and let's have some fun with it. But I think what you're referring to is more particularly those founders packages where you're getting beta access as well as a few goodies by shelling out some money. And those I do have a problem with. I'm just from an older school, I guess, where a beta was designed to be a testing phase. It was designed to give people access to a game that were relatively experienced on testing products, giving feedback, and finding errors and bugs and things like that throughout the entire game. It was an integral part of the testing process. We're not seeing that too much anymore. In 2012 especially, you saw a path away from that, where we'll let you play our game, even though it's not complete or done, not ready for launch, if you pay us money. And if you do that, we'll give you these extra goodies as well. We'll guarantee you get beta access, and then you'll get some extra grab bag items too. And the one that really kind of started this, at least for me, visually started this trend, was when Perfect World, I'm not saying it hasn't been done before, but the one that really, I think, kicked off this trend of noticing it, in my view, was when Perfect World Entertainment gave you Neverwinter beta for pre-ordering Torchlight 2 directly from them. Weird little cross-promotion, I get it. That kind of treaded the line for me, but then other games, Smite and a slew of titles, said, okay, if you give us $19.99, we'll let you play the beta, and we'll give you some goodies in-game too as well. And I just think that's terrible. I don't like it. I don't like a company reaping both benefits. It seems like at that point you are encouraging what your companies previously discouraged. They didn't want people in the beta that were only interested in playing the game before all of their friends had. They wanted beta testers that were going to give them feedback to help the development of the game. And when you say, hey, give us $19.99 and we'll let you in our game in a beta phase, you're directly slapping that idea in the face, and now the company reaps both benefits. Not only do they get the benefit of people in there playing the game, some of whom will still report errors, but they're also reaping a financial benefit as well. So to me, it's kind of double dipping on the company side. I don't like it. I think it minimizes the importance of betas. And now all the main testing is done in a very, very closed alpha and maybe a closed beta if the game even has one. Which I think in the end shortchanges the game. So yeah, I don't like them. Particularly when they throw in the beta access. I have no problem with a launch game bundling items in its cash shop to make some little pack and give you a couple of bucks off. That I'm totally fine with. It's when you start paying for beta access that I question the development cycle of the game, and I automatically question what the end result, quality-wise, of the game is going to be because you're shortchanging the development. What do you think, though? I mean, a lot of people like that because they just want to play the game ahead of anybody else, and they're willing to shell out that money. I'm not. I don't want to play an unfinished product and pay for the right to do so. Just seems silly in my book. What do you think, though? Put your comments in the boxes below there. Next question. All right, so Student Yaoi says, Magicman, what do you think's happening to Guild Wars 2? Why is the population shrinking? Why are so many people leaving? Well, I know it's not free to play, but we'll talk about it briefly because I think there's two key factors in what's going on with the Guild Wars 2 population. One, they just announced that they sold 3 million boxes, and congratulations to ArenaNet. That's a very, very big number, and kudos to them. And they haven't released too many specifics, but from what I understand, the gem shop is very lucrative as well. And I actually like the way their gem shop is implemented, so kudos to them there. They thought through the business model, and they succeeded on those two fronts. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey. The first reason I think you're seeing a lot of people leave is because you had a higher number of people to start out with. Every MMO, when it comes out, has that phase where a month or two or 3 or 4, whatever, into the game, a portion of the population leaves. It just wasn't for them. They played it as much as they're going to, and that's it. And that happens with every title. But when you start with 2-3 million box sales and players, and that same percentage leaves, you notice it a lot more because it's a lot bigger, a lot more people leaving the game. So that's one thing. You have the normal drop-off of players. You just recognize it more because there were more players to start out with and a larger percentage of them left. The second piece, and I hate to say this, I do enjoy Guild Wars, but it's become a game that I'm not playing every day. In fact, the last time I logged in was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's because the end game isn't thought out. It's thought out the way ArenaNet wanted it, but it's not, in my opinion only, it's not thought out with the idea of retention. You don't have the typical raids and things like that going on, which all of us knew going into launch it wasn't going to have. ArenaNet was very forthcoming with that. PvP has pretty much remained stagnant since the day it launched, with a couple tweaks here and there, but it's the same thing you got on launch day. And that kind of reduced the end game to a cosmetic and or legendary type weapon grind, where you ran dungeons over and over and over again to get tokens and farm up mats and try to get these advanced weapons for a PvE side. On the PvP side, you've just kept doing your WVW and, yeah, things like that. And some events have added some spice, the fractals and things like that. Great, they add a little bit of spice. But if you look at exactly what the end game is, that's a very particular type of player that they're aiming at retaining. They're aiming at retaining the person that doesn't care if PvP is the same, as long as they can do it and they enjoy it. And there's a certain portion of the PvP audience that if the game doesn't change or add new maps or evolve and do this, they don't want to stay. So you have another percentage leaving there. PvE, I'm not one for that type of gear grind. I'm okay with a gear grind. I come from an older MMO school. No big deal to me. But when we're talking about a large portion of that grind being cosmetic, that has no appeal to me. So I leave on the PvE side. So I think you're going to see some changes. They're releasing content in January, February, and March. They've been quoted as saying it's an expansion's worth of content. Don't confuse that. It's not an expansion as far as a level cap increase or a new zone or anything, but they're dropping a lot of content into the game itself. Maybe that will revitalize it. But I think those are the two reasons you see a lot of people leaving. The endgame left a lot to be desired for a lot of people. If you're playing Guild Wars 2 and you love it, totally understand it. Great game, enjoy it. It's just not for me, and it's not for a lot of other players when that is what the endgame is. And then, obviously, with a bigger starting percentage of players, you notice when a lot more leave than when you're examining a smaller MMO. One last thing that I would say on this, too, is that because there's no sub, people are free to come and go. They don't stay longer than they ordinarily would because they feel like, I need to get my $15 worth for this month. And that is definitely where I fit. I leave Guild Wars 2 for a couple of weeks, and then I come back and I play it hardcore for a week or two because they've put in some new event, like the Fractals or something like that. So, yeah, the sub plays into that a little bit, but I think it's my first 2 points prior to that. If you're playing Guild Wars 2 and you left or you love it, tell us why. But I think that's what's influencing your player population there. And their patches and content in January, February, March is going to say a lot about the coming year for Guild Wars 2 and whether it can start pulling some of those people back in large numbers. All right, next question. All right, our next question today comes from Genesis Rage, who asks a question that actually we get quite a bit in some different formats here and there. Genesis Rage asks, for those games that get a first look very early in development, like alpha or very early closed beta, is there any opportunity of putting a show together that's a second look at those games later in the beta phase or even after launch? And we get this question a lot. Sometimes it's X game has changed an awful lot. Your first look's 3 or 4 years old. Could you go and do a second look? Sometimes it's phrased like that, but you get the point. It's, can we do a show where we go back and give a new look at something older or something that's changed a lot since our original first look? That gets challenging to do. First off, let's take a game that a viewer and I were talking about a few episodes ago, Age of Conan. Has had a lot of changes since launch. A lot of them. Has had changes since the in the free-to-play model since launch. We reported on changes a few weeks ago that they were making. And they wanted us to go and do a second look at the game. Well, first off, it takes time, right, to put a show together, even if it's a 15 or a 20-minute show that's just gameplay. You still got to decide what you're going to show, how you're going to show it, how you're going to present it, and what you're going to talk about. So there's time that goes into it. 2, the problem with looking at older games, Age of Conan, is that the changes are most of the time impacting the end game or the higher level content. And so for us to do a second look showing you those changes would involve the time taking to level. You know, you don't want to see Noob Island again in a second look. So that's the challenge with looking at an older game. With looking at a game that, like Lime Odyssey, we have a first look on the site that's a very early alpha build. Whenever the game comes out, should we do another first look on it? I think so. There's been so much time between that alpha and it's still not being out yet that a lot could have changed. We probably do want to take another look at it. Will we make its own show? Probably not. That's what we use the gameplay action show for. If you've seen it, there's a few episodes online already. That's our odds and ends type show where myself, Spunkified, Jess Brohard sat and played Desperate Gods and filmed it and put that up. We put games that maybe we don't have a first look for and we just go and one of us is playing it, so we'll record it. We've done updates where we have a first look for this, but let's go and look at it again. So I don't think we'll have our own show dedicated to it, specifically because of the time that it takes to do something like that. But check out Gameplay Action. That's where you will see occasionally a second look pop up and be posted in that show. Great question. I wanted to answer it because we get it a lot in multiple forms. So hope that answers it for you. Next question. All right, so James R. asks a sticky question. What's my opinion of games that are in development forever, like Cabal 2? And do I think there should be a cap on how long a game is in development given the fast pace that technology changes? This is a tough one. I'm not going to sit here, I'm not a game developer. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, you should 3 years. That's it. Be all end all. If you can't get it done in 3 years, throw it out. But I do think that developers can and should look at the timeline from beginning to end when designing things. And I'm sure they do, to an extent. Do you have examples of maybe smaller companies pumping, or bigger companies it happens, pumping something out that's been in development for so long that it looks last gen as soon as you get to play it? Yeah, it happens. Fortunately, bigger companies, Microsoft, EA, those types of companies, they're already ahead of us on the technology. So usually when they start developing, they've given themselves another year or two onto whatever their initial time frame was, because they're developing it on hardware that is more advanced than what most of us are able to get at home anyway. So, yeah, should there be a time lapse? Yeah, there probably should, and I would like to think that all developers do that in their planning. But I would say 2 to 3 years is the point where you really have to start examining what you're building. Because in a 3-year cycle, you usually get new processors, the next-gen graphics cards, specifically speaking about PC, and that's a lot of change, as far as what is available to the average consumer. What do I think of games that are stuck in development hell? It's horrible. And if you look at Cabal 2 as a specific example, it's been in development for a while. The problem with that one, and a lot of games do this, is that I think they advertised the fact that they were making it way too early in the development cycle. And so although their cycle may be on par with other products that they've produced, and they don't view it as it's been in development forever like we do, we view it that way because we got word of it probably way earlier than we should. And I hate that when, it's 2 years before release and we still don't see a title, but we've seen all these advertisements and trailer videos and things like that. And I don't know what their payment model is going to be. I have a feeling since it's NCSoft, it's going to be subscription-based. But WildStar is one of those that I've been watching forever and have been looking forward to trying. But it's literally won most anticipated awards for the last 2 years from different sites and outlets and things like that. And I think they're on the verge right now of reaching that point where gamers don't care anymore. It's, oh yeah, we've heard about this for years now, and we still don't see it. You know what? I'm going to go and play that new game that actually did come out. There's a drawback when you start pumping your game way earlier than you should. Cabal 2, I think, falls into that trap. I don't know if Cabal 2 has actually exceeded development times on the developers' standpoint, but from our standpoint, it definitely has, because we found out about it very early, and it's still not here. It sucks. I hate it. If it's going to be a longer development cycle, fine. Do what you need to do to make a good game. Stay away from the advertising until there's, we're going to see it relatively soon. I think advertising plays a lot more into that than the development side, though. So there you go. Just my opinion. Last question. Okay, so Valorage says, why do so many games follow in the World of Warcraft model? WASD movement, hotbars, things like that. Why is there a lack of innovation in the free-to-play market? Valorage is a great question, but I think the question should be a little bigger. I don't think it's limited to the free-to-play market. I think it's actually a part of gaming as a whole, but let's narrow it down to what we cover, and let's just say it's an MMO thing or an online game thing as well. Whether it's free-to-play, subscription-based, whatever, you see what we all deem to be this lack of innovation between titles. You mentioned two things in particular, WASD movement and hotbars. WASD movement, I think, is a little... I don't really agree with it being in the question. First off, we all know that WoW wasn't the first MMO, but it was probably the most popular MMO at the time, and to a certain extent it still is today, obviously. WASD was around way before then, and it's an ideal moving scenario if you're going to play with a keyboard and a mouse to use WASD and then a camera roll with a mouse. It's just ideal. It's the way the Western MMO audience is used to controlling things. So I think it's just a convenience piece there. What's your other options? Use a controller. Great. All right. That's even better if the game is suited for that. If not, and you're going to be using a keyboard and a mouse or a gamepad, 4 buttons and a scroll wheel. It's a pretty standard thing. So I don't think you're going to see innovation there in that aspect of things until we get like virtual reality hands and, the gloves that, are like the Power Glove but work, and when we can do things like that, or virtual reality helmets. I don't think you're going to see much innovation in movement styles. Point to click, please stop putting that damn thing in games. Ugh. As far as hotbars and things like that, it's an ease of use. So here's where innovation comes in. Is there innovation in the MMO game space? I think so. I think we don't give it a lot of credit for having innovation, because we look at it as such a, this title came out this year, this title came out 6 months later, they were virtually the same thing. And so we go, there's no innovation. I think you need to look at it on a bigger perspective. Look at it from back in the UO days to, 2 years from that, to 2 years from that, all the way up to current. And you see small innovation. Now take a game we have now compared to one that's 8 or 10 years old, and you see a lot of innovation. Are there areas to improve? Of course. The exclamation, question mark, questing system, there's got to be a better way to do that. Guild Wars 2 experimented with some stuff there as far as the renown hearts and things like that. So you're starting to see some innovation. The problem is the industry doesn't reward innovation. And that's a huge problem. You could argue that things like companies like Funcom and the Secret World were all about innovation. Yeah, it was basic movement. Maybe the combat was a little lackluster for you. But the way that the MMO was presented, the way the quests were presented, the types of quests that you were embarking on, the storyline that you followed, there was a lot, there is, I enjoy it still, there's an awful lot in the secret world that is innovative. The problem is the industry didn't reward it. Now, is that a case of Funcom didn't execute? It could be. In your book, it totally could be that. Or is, you didn't like the game and therefore Funcom didn't execute. All right. So we don't really reward innovation unless it's also executed well, and it's very hard to do both of those at the same time in your very first shot. Now, if Funcom would take the Secret World model and try to, tighten up some things and do something else with it, do I think they could have a lot more success? Yeah. Because it would be their second shot experimenting with innovation they already had put in. Unfortunately, the industry didn't reward them at all for Secret World. Right or wrong, I'm not saying Funcom should have been or should not have been. The sales are what they are, and it went buy to play, so that should tell you something about the way the sales were. But since the industry didn't reward it the way they thought they were going to be rewarded, now Funcom is going to make smaller things. So there's a fine line that developers and publishers have to be aware of. Yes, of course they want to innovate because they want their product to stand out. But if you innovate too much and you don't do it well, you have a financial failure on your hand that is going to impede future products. So I think that's why you see, especially in the MMO space, that you have to look at a bigger window. The innovation isn't from game to game. The innovation is from a few years to a few years. Does it suck? Yes. Would I love to see that title that comes out next month be totally different from any MMO I've ever played? Yes, I would love it. But I also want it to be good. And because I'm that picky, and all of us are that picky, it's hard to execute that type of vision. So, yeah. Is there a lack of innovation? I think if you look at smaller time frames, yes. If you look at a larger time frame, you can see all kinds of small pieces changing throughout the timeline. And there is innovation there, but along the way, there's 900 other people that are just going to copy exactly what they deem works and throw it out there. And that's, again, free-to-play market. You always hear me. There's like 5%, 10% top-tier titles that you would love to play, and then there's a whole lot of garbage below it. So look at it from a bigger time frame, and when games are innovative, even if you may not like them, at least give them the kudos for trying to be innovative. But give your feedback in an honest and non-trolly-oly way. Well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. If you've got views on any of the questions we talked about, I'd love to hear it. Even if it's an opinion that's different from mine, put it in the comments below. While you're there, click like, subscribe. Come on over to MMOBomb.com. Don't forget to leave your questions below on YouTube, on the site, or even email them to Magicman@MMOBomb.com. With no questions, we got no show. Until next week, gang, stay safe, and we'll see you on the servers.
They ain't moving, they be watching, so I'm out here doing work. Then I get the party popping, cause with every minute wasting, know my chances steady dropping.